Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tracy Johnson. I'm the Dean of the Division of Life Sciences here at UCLA. So I just want to mention a few housekeeping items before we begin. This event is being recorded, so you will have the opportunity to ask questions during the Q&A. We'd really like to welcome you to this special event, Psychology Connects, Understanding Adolescence from Brain Development to Behavior. And I'd really like to take this opportunity to thank Loretta and Victor Kaufman, who have helped bring this series to life. This amazing event and this entire series just simply wouldn't happen without them. So thank you so much for your support. So through this Psychology Connects series, we are able to offer exciting connections to our faculty who will share their latest research. And they will have conversations, as you will see tonight, with noted public figures, actors and actresses, athletes, artists, all who are committed to bringing a deep awareness and action to addressing life's problems and, frankly, enhancing its joys. Today's event will cover such captivating topics as early adolescent development, related to decision-making, risk-taking tendencies, learning, sleep, and emotions. So I assure you there'll be something interesting for everyone. But before I introduce you to Distinguished Professor and Chair of the Department of Psychology, Annette Stanton, please allow me this opportunity to just say a little bit more about UCLA psychology faculty and students. I have to say, one of the real pleasures of taking on the position of Dean of Life Sciences is having the opportunity to learn about and to amplify the amazing work happening here in our division. And the Department of Psychology is a jewel in that. We are #1 clinical psychology program in the country. We have the #4 social psychology program and the #5 behavioral neuroscience program. So there really is a deep well of excellence in the life sciences here at UCLA. So I'm really pleased to introduce you to the chair of this amazing department, Distinguished Professor Annette Stanton. In addition to her appointment in the Department of Psychology, Dr. Stanton is also a professor in psychiatry and biobehavioral sciences. She's a member of our Johnson Comprehensive Cancer Center and is a scientist in UCLA Cousin Center for Psychoneuroimmunology. So her lab characterizes and really helps to understand what assists and hinders people undergoing profound stressors such as cancer. And then she's able to translate these findings into approaches that promote well-being and health. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Annette Stanton.
Dean Johnson, and good evening, everyone. As you've heard, I have the distinct honor of chairing the UCLA Department of Psychology, and I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's Psychology Connects. I also want to thank Victor and Loretta. It's a true pleasure to work with you, and the department's so grateful for your incredible support of UCLA psychology. Here in the department, we have some of the world's foremost experts conducting highly innovative and impactful research in behavioral neuroscience, cognitive, clinical, developmental, health, quantitative, and social psychology. We also focus on educating new generations to foster tomorrow's esteemed leaders in psychological research, teaching, and public service. We have the largest undergraduate major at UCLA with more than 4,000 students enrolled in our 3 psychology majors. That's more than twice as big as the town I grew up in. And our highly competitive PhD program enrolls approximately 200 graduate students. We also serve the community. In addition to translating our psychological science into action to enhance the public's health, UCLA Psychology operates a psychology clinic that provides low-fee, evidence-based therapy and assessment services. Our infant development program provides high-quality childcare to infants and toddlers of faculty, staff, and students at UCLA. So in today's UCLA Psychology Connect, we'll hear from Dr. Adriana Galván and Ms. Jennifer Garner on the importance of early adolescent development. Benefiting from both Dr. Galván's expertise in neuroscience and psychology and Ms. Garner's longtime advocacy on issues of child poverty and early childhood learning in the United States. After their conversation, we'll invite you to join the discussion, and during that portion of the program, we'll take questions from all of you that we can get to. So Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Professor Adriana Galván. Dr. Galván is a professor of psychology, and this past summer, she was appointed UCLA's Dean of Undergraduate Education. Dr. Galván's primary goal in her lab is to understand adolescent behavior by using neuroimaging methods to study the maturing adolescent brain, including how stress, sleep habits, puberty, and social relationships affect how adolescents make choices and decide to take risks. Dr. Galván earned her BA from Barnard College at Columbia and a PhD in neuroscience from Cornell. She spent 2 years at UCLA as a postdoctoral scholar before joining our faculty in 2008, and we're so fortunate to have her in the department. Now it's my honor to introduce our guest, Jennifer Garner. Ms. Garner is an actress and producer. You probably all know that. After her supporting role in Pearl Harbor, she gained recognition for her performance as CIA agent Sidney Bristow in the ABC spy action television series Alias. For her work on the series, she won a Golden Globe Award and a Screen Actors Guild Award and received 4 Primetime Emmy Award nominations. Ms. Garner appeared in such films as Catch Me If You Can, Daredevil, Elektra, Juno, and Dallas Buyers Club. Her most recent film is Yes Day, and it can be seen on Netflix, and it's about a mom and dad who usually say no and then decide to say yes to their kids' wildest requests with a few ground rules on a day of fun and adventure. In addition to being an award-winning actress and mother of 3, so she brings a lot of expertise to us tonight about adolescence or pre-adolescence, Jennifer works as an activist for early childhood education and is a board member of Save the Children USA. She's also co-founder of the company Once Upon a Farm, which creates kid-friendly organic foods, and she's just a wonderful person because I got to talk to her before this. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Adriana Galván and Ms. Jennifer Garner.
Thank you, Annette. That's such a nice introduction.
Yes, thank you. Hi.
I'm so happy that you are here and we get to chat about things that we are both so excited about. Mostly early childhood education and the importance of that. But I just want to say that I know how much work and advocacy you do in this space, and I'm grateful that you do it and that you really know the importance of early nutrition and literacy and parenting. And I'm a parent too. Annette mentioned that you're a mom of 3 kids. I'm a mom of 2 kids. Mine are 7 and 10, so a little before adolescence. But
I'm right in adolescence. I have 15, 12, and 9. So I'm out of early and I'm into adolescence. And I have to say, as much as I love Save the Children, sometimes I wish that I could shift all of my focus on how do these brains work. But I'm so happy to talk to you and really fascinated to hear everything that you have to say and just talk about what I see out in our, in rural America and what it looks like for kids growing up in poverty in rural America and how it relates to all of your work. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Me too. Well, it's funny you say that about how you're in the thick of adolescence and all of it relates, right? I mean, it's not the case that someone can have one experience as a child and then it means nothing for adolescence, but all of that is so foundational. And I think that for most people about Save the Children, that's kind of the point, right? That all of it is going to build on the experiences that you have as a kid, and brain development gets shaped by those experiences.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so I know that you are someone who you go out in the fields, you are chatting with these kids and their parents, you're laughing with them, you're reading to them. So what have you learned from visiting their homes and schools all across America?
Oh my gosh, it's such a big question to start off, but thank you. And I'm so lucky. I think one of the gifts of my life is that, just being on a TV show put me in the position to not just be able to meet moms in rural America all over the country and just with all the struggles that they have, to bear witness to stories from, Quinault Indian Nation to our Native American families on the upper west corner of Washington State, all the way down to Alligator, Mississippi, and to my home state of West Virginia, and everything in between. There's so many beautiful stories out there, and I'm allowed into homes that I would never be allowed into if I hadn't been put in this position. So I'm incredibly grateful. But gosh, just to pick a couple of things, what I'll say is that learning does not look the same in the middle of the country if you're growing up poor as it does in, Westwood or anywhere in Santa Monica or the Palisades where I am. Learning is, these moms are really up against it. They have their babies and they have no community around them. If you think about how vast our country is and how many women are raising kids without anyone nearby. I mean, for example, in Tennessee, it's a state where the more kids you have, the more welfare you receive. So families move. A young mother and her husband might move from another state, but then they don't have any family around. Yeah. So then here they are stuck in Tennessee having babies, where, by the way, the climate is perfect for cockroaches to take over trailer homes. For whatever reason, cockroaches love trailer homes in Tennessee. And so kids are just completely inured to the feel of a cockroach running over their leg. And as you sit there and you count them on the walls and you count them, around the children, just trying to keep your face calm, these moms are up against the opioid epidemics in their towns. They're up against the fact that there are no books in their towns. There's one book for every poor child in America. There's one book for every 13 poor children in America, instead of imagine what we have in our homes for our kids. So they just don't have resources. They don't have gas money to get to parenting classes. They don't have family around often. They really are completely isolated and just trying to figure out the impossible, which is, how do you raise a baby?
Yeah, exactly. And it's such an important point you make about the books, because so much research has shown, right, that the number of books relates to literacy, right? And it's obviously not just the number of books that you can count, but what those books signify. And that is that child is getting read to, that child is exploring and sounding out words on their own. And all of those things contribute to the inputs that are shaping the brain. So the brain starts getting shaped, from the minute before we are born, right? And so the amount of input that they're getting is going to make a difference in their own ability to seek out books and learning and all the things. And that coincides with the context around them. So if they're not surrounded by family and a supportive emotional context, even try as they might, the parents, of course, want to do right by their children. That's going to impact their learning ability when they get to school.
Oh, absolutely. If you have a child, if you're poor growing up in America, by the time you're 4, you're 18 months behind developmentally. At least that's from Save the Children. You guys may have something different, but so that just means that you really see it with your eyes, and you see why. I go into houses and they're silent. The kids aren't babbling. They aren't crying. They aren't laughing. They are quiet, and they're sitting because there's no input. The only sound they hear is the drone of a TV, sometimes without even a picture. There'll just be Little Mermaid or some kind of talk show playing in the background, and a child is just sitting without being anything turning on. And the amazing thing is that when you do go in with somebody who can encourage the mom and help her out of just the kind of stupor that comes from just existing, from the stressor of poverty, of not knowing where your next meal is coming from, of how to diaper your child, of what you're going to do, just how you're going to get from point A from point B. And if you can get to that mom and encourage her and love her, she can really, emote with that child and connect with them. And by the time you leave an hour later, you have a different child and a different mom in front of you.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point, that it's not just about the child, right? It's the family too, and the dynamics, and giving the parents the tools that they need, even if the tool is just, I hear you, I see you, And
Yes.
I can't raise you out of this trailer park today, but I can give you the tools to support your child, right? Because being impoverished doesn't mean that you have a particular outcome. It's just that you are less likely to have the tools and resources to not be in that circumstance, right? You can still provide an enriching environment. We have a study where we go into homes all over LA because we're interested in sleep and sleep habits. We can talk about that later, but sleep is, as you probably know,
Oh my gosh, so fascinating.
So important and so fascinating and so dynamic in the adolescent years. But what we find is that we predicted that kids who were in a lower SES home would have poorer sleep because they have worse lighting and the temperature isn't right and they live near a freeway, you know, all these things. But what we found is that what matters the most is the quality of the bedding, and that bedding could be good whether you're in an impoverished home or a wealthy home. It means just paying attention to the things that are really basic needs like nutrition and sleep and support. And so we can't raise everybody out of poverty. Of course, we would want to, but we can still give everybody the tools that they need to support their kids' development.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I love is watching one of our home visitors go into a home and just teach the mom, just like a neighbor or an auntie would do, and just teach the mom what swaddling the baby does for the child, what a sleep schedule does for the child. Because if you are in a trailer where there's light coming in, or, you know, or gosh, a cinder block home, or so many different variations of homes that I've seen people raising their kids, or in a homeless shelter, your kid is catching naps as they can, and that includes nighttime, that includes, so they're all kinds of dysregulated from the jump in the morning. And especially because these kids are often wearing dirty diapers for a lot of the day, then those two things combined, there's already a friction in that child that's making them dysregulated. So they're not even able to take in. If the mom was feeling like she could meet that kid and smile and chat, which she has, you know, has not been given the tools to do often, and it hasn't been modeled for her. She has no idea, you know, why her child is fussy. And I'll walk into a home and think, oh my gosh, that diaper needs to be changed.
It needs to be.
No wonder you're fussy.
Exactly. The basic needs. If you're uncomfortable, all of us, if we're hot, we're cold, we're itchy, you can't focus on whatever you need to focus. And then when that child goes to school, it's really hard to focus if you're sleep deprived, if your clothes are uncomfortable, if you're feeling, you know, that you need something, nutrition, right? And so I know that one of the things you work on is on nutrition. And so I was hoping that you might share some of your interest in that and how that came to be.
Well, the whole reason that I'll back up a little bit and just explain why this is such a passion for me and why I've worked for Save the Children for 13, almost 14 years now, which is that, 12, almost 13 years. Sorry, I have to think of when I was pregnant with which kid. So my mom grew up super poor, Dust Bowl depression, Oklahoma, absolutely nothing. And education was her way out. She's the only one in her family to have gone to college. Wow. And she had just enough people along the way tell her, you know what, you're clever. You could keep going to school. And she kind of just bumbled along and kept going. But that difference, the fact that she kept going, changed the trajectory of my sisters and my lives. And then on the flip side, we ended up living, because we were transferred to West Virginia, which is one of the great gifts of my life to be from this state. So in West Virginia, I was, middle class, but I was surrounded by generational rural poverty. And I was very aware as a kid, because of my heritage, I should be them. Because of where I live, I should be them. Yeah. And even though, we didn't have a lot, growing up now where my kids are, I realize we really didn't have a lot, but I was one holler and one generation removed from poverty. Yeah. And I really felt that keenly, so that when I had a little bit of a voice, I went searching and looking for the organization that had the most efficacy in rural America, because I thought, who's helping kids like my mom pull themselves up, and who's helping kids like the kids that I grew up with that I don't know what happened to them because there was only public school. I only knew,
Right.
I only knew kids that just had to have gone. What did they go home to? I just didn't even know. And so this search led me to Save the Children, where I've been an enthusiastic artist ambassador and board member for so long that they are probably sick of me. But in that process, going back now to what you asked me about nutrition, we Save the Children works in conjunction with the school. So we can't spend money on brick and mortar, but we need some kind of home base. And what we do is we partner with schools. We look for school districts who want us, counties who want us. The state kind of leads us to, these are our hardest hit areas. That's where we go, and we go into the schools, and from there we'll do home visitation, and then we will also do an in-school, after-school summer literacy program. And as in all of these schools that we visit, it's at least 50, usually more like 85 to 100% free and reduced lunches. And that means that these kids have breakfast when they get to school, they have lunch provided by school, and often if they're in our programs, they have an after school snack. But often, for example, I was in a school in West Virginia, and at 2:50, if school got out at 3, somebody came over the loudspeaker and said, "Code cupcake, code cupcake." And a bunch of kids got up and quietly took their backpacks and left the room. And it was so that they wouldn't have to be embarrassed when it was time to go and have their backpacks filled with food. And on Fridays, extra things are stuffed in there. If there's a snow day coming, extra things, but they go home with full backpacks, absolutely full of food. And so, of course, when the pandemic hit, Save immediately knew those 30 million kids who were going to be away from their feeding programs, and their parents as well. And we knew that kids in rural America would have even less access to the kinds of feeding programs that you would see in the rest of the country in urban areas. So we quickly pivoted and started feeding kids right away. We started with Save with Stories, this program, and worked with No Kid Hungry, and just put food on the school buses. But we just helped because I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but it's like I could go on and on. But the schools have had the money and they had the food ordered. They just needed the extra money to maybe have the school bus drivers go early and deliver out to the hollers in the middle of nowhere. And that's all over the country. Where I'm from, it's a holler, but it could be anywhere. Or that is for, people being on the bus to get their eyes on the kids and see maybe there was a reason to call in Child Protective Services. Maybe there was a reason to worry. Maybe somebody needed an extra book or some bubbles or something to just brighten them up. But that's how we pivoted into food in this last year.
I mean, I think the pandemic has really uncovered things that were already there, like you're saying, but it really just brought it to the forefront to say that there are immediate needs that these kids need, like nutrition, right? I mean, LAUSD, same thing, right? There were lunch pickups and things like that for kids who really relied on this food.
Yes, and families who are living on the razor's edge didn't have a week or two to get it figured out. Right. I was in Kentucky visiting our programs the week before everything shut down, and they were already in figuring out mode. How are we going to fund these buses to get food to these families? Yeah. They don't have food if we aren't providing it. How are we going to do it? Right. And it was kind of incredible. It's a beautiful thing to get to see the brains in America figuring things out for kids who don't have anything. And I'm so lucky because I get to meet school principals and local officials and, either state, the school board in Arkansas. I love those people. I know the local superintendents in Perry County, Kentucky, and I see how much they care and how much they're invested in the well-being of these kids. And it's kind of
knowing how, coming back to what we started with before, is how important it is for everything else, right? Like it's so foundational for kids. And we now know that the period of 0 to 5 is so important for brain development, the inputs that kids get, but it also picks up again at the time of puberty. And the experiences that you have help you finish refining the brain development that's going to continue through the mid-20s, right? That your brain doesn't stop growing at 5. It keeps growing and it keeps developing. And what changes isn't so much the size of your brain or what it looks like, but more how it responds to the world. And I think that's so important. And we know that in adolescence, the inputs include being interested in social. I mean, I don't know about your kids, but even my son is 10, and he's already showing a lot more interest in his friends than he used to. A lot more interest in his friends compared to us, right? They matter. What they think the opinions of what he's wearing or what he's doing is really important, and that's so normal, right? And so it's just so important to think about what's developmentally appropriate at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. But if you're just straight up talking education, so many people really focus on let's really help middle schoolers. And it's great. We do. I have a middle schooler. We have to help middle schoolers.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. None of it matters if they're going into kindergarten already in remediation,
Yeah.
which so much of the country is. You have these brilliant minds.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine if you took one of your brilliant children and told them, hey, you're in remediation, you need help, the first day of kindergarten, they would hate school. They would hate school.
Yeah.
They would hate school.
They're already being told that they're not up to snuff like their peers, right? They're already isolated from everybody else.
Absolutely. And then they have parents who also dropped out of school. So day one, these kids are just like, I kind of came into this feeling hopeful, but this is not that cool. I don't think I'm not into it. This isn't going well for me.
Yeah.
And then, so you can see it's pretty easy to see how you get from a poor first day of kindergarten where you are not ready. You've never held a book in your hands. You don't know how to tolerate listening to a story. You don't know how to stand in line or sit in a circle or pay attention because it's never been asked of you. Less than 5% of kids in this country who are eligible for early Head Start have access. Less than 35% of kids eligible for Head Start have access. And that means, and preschool is just a fancy kid thing to do. So you've never had anyone helping this brain architecture, and you're just like, this is lame. How are you expected to get to be a successful adolescent or high schooler? It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be much harder for sure. So you started this at, would you say 12, 13, 14 years that you've been in Save the Children? So that sounds like it coincides when your kids were kind of at the same age. So I'm sure that's informed the way you kind of work with your kids and the learning opportunities you provide for them.
Definitely. I mean, one thing was just learning what kindergarten readiness is, because on the west side of LA, kindergarten readiness is practically multiplication and, reading.
Right.
You're reading by the time you go to kindergarten. But gosh, in the rest of the country, it is really about just, you don't have to know the ABCs, but it's great to know they exist. And you don't have to, be able to read a book, but it's great if you've read a book or if somebody's read to you and you can turn pages and you know what a book is. And so it was really adjusting my thought process that way, and also thinking about nursery rhymes as building blocks, also thinking about songs as building blocks, just a way for kids to hold on to language and acquire language. It's just and also the importance of, we've done a lot of work with Pat Cool at iLabs in Washington. Oh my gosh, it's so brilliant. Talking about
amazing.
He's amazing. Just the capacity for brain growth, for what the brain can achieve, all being set up when they're little.
Yeah. For everybody who doesn't know, Pat Cool, she's a professor of psychology at the University of Washington, and she studies language development and how important, as Jen said earlier, the number of stories that our kids are read to, or the dialogue that kids experience when they're very young, even infants, matters for the number of words that kids can produce, for example. And she also studies bilingualism. And anyway, we're both fans. It turned out that she's really
huge fan.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So another thing that I think is so important that happens early in life isn't just the inputs and the nutrition and the literacy access, but the sense of autonomy and decision making, right? That we are agents in our own ability to learn from the world and to interact with the world. And it's funny, when I saw your movie at my kids' request yesterday, I really thought about that, about how adolescents are sometimes not given the opportunity to make their own choices at the time when they really want to be autonomous, and when they want to have, their get the respect that they think they deserve, and they do deserve, from parents and everything else. And so, were you thinking about that when you signed on to do this movie about giving kids autonomy for a day?
Well, yesterday, thank you for mentioning. I hope your kids had fun watching it.
Oh, they loved it. And first of all, my daughter wants to know if you actually did the backflip in the movie.
I did.
You
but
did?
I was on wires. I mean, there were men helping me. I was on a harness and wires. But I didn't. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot to heave this old body up and over. But anyway, the whole impetus for the movie, it really came from my own life, because I was a fan of Amy Krauss Rosenthal's beautiful book Yesterday. Yeah. And it's a story where for 24 hours the kids make the rules and the kids ask for what they want. Of course, in the movie we take it like, and it's the farthest reaching, most extreme version of it, and it's super fun. It's a real wish fulfillment, cozy family comedy. But in my life, I've been having yes days since, well, my middle daughter was 3 and she's 12. So for 9 years. Wow. And they're much more, it is the idea, but it's much more about how do you flip the rules that kids are feel chafed by, that we don't even think about. Like, in my house, when my daughter was little, she wanted to sit in the front seat of the car and play with the knobs. And so we just went to a parking lot and she sat in the front seat and she kind of twiddled around. She wanted to put her head out of the sunroof. So we did that. They wanted to choose the cereal, things that are suggested in the book. Much more, they wanted to have a tent outside. So we did that. But it was much more just like whatever they would say, I would say, yes, top priority, you've got it. And it's an exhausting day, but you realize how much we just casually make decisions for our kids without even knowing it.
That's right. And say no. I mean, for a lot of no's is not a fun thing to hear.
And the implied no's, like we're just like, oh, no, we're not going to stay up all night and watch that. No,
Right, exactly. We have reasons for it, but it doesn't sound that way when you're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So one thing you said earlier that I wanted to pick up on is growing up in West Virginia. Can you say more about your upbringing and maybe how that's informed your interest? You said a little bit about it, but did you have yes days?
No, we didn't have yes days, that's for sure. Growing up in West Virginia, I really, it's more than anything, it's growing up my mom and dad's daughter and growing up the middle of 3 girls and growing up in a town where I was really in a community. If my mom wasn't home when I got home from school, it's not like she could have called me or texted me or left, I would just go to a neighbor and I would just keep going to neighbors till I found someone at home who maybe had a box of Triscuits, or I'd sit on the porch. I knew I was safe. I knew I was cared for. I knew that the neighborhood would protect me. And I grew up very much in a community, so that one of my own personal triumphs is that I can create and find a community wherever I go. And that is something that it has to be important. I mean, I may not know what you guys know, but I have to believe that community has to be just one of the main purposes in life. And it doesn't matter.
That's what we know too, right? We know that friendships as a child or as an adult, male or female, are so important, that your community, that sense of belonging is something that stays with us forever. And that starts when we're so young. Feeling like you belong is really going to contribute to your identity and your ability to thrive.
So imagine being a mom who isn't close to other moms, who doesn't have friends around. I met a mom, her name was Cinderella. And she was, she goes by Cinda, but she's Cinderella. And she lives on the corner of the country, on the northwest corner of Washington. She's not in Quinault, but she's close to that forest. And her husband's a firefighter, and they live on $80 a month a lot of the year. And then when he's a firefighter, they have a little bit more money, but he's gone for a couple of months and then will come home for 2 days and is gone. She's raising a couple of kids of her own, and her brother's son, who has special needs, who she's taken over because her brother has an addiction problem. And when you see her, she's just by herself in truly the middle of nowhere, and she's just trying to figure it out. So if an organization like ours can be a lifeline, and what we do, in my opinion, is we create community where there is none. So for these moms who have no one to call, who have no one showing them what to do, guiding them, bringing books over, saying, hey, do you need a little bit of help? Do you need a ride to that job interview? What can I do for you? We kind of just create it. And it doesn't take many times of a mom meeting another woman who cares about her for there to be a real connection there. And that just kind of brings the mom to life. And then if that person is saying to her, look at what a great mom you are. Look at how you're connected to your baby. I mean, you're speaking to them. Look at your reading log that you filled out for us. Here's some books for this week. Here's what you've done. You're changing your child's life by reading to them. Well, sure enough, that mom is going to turn on and read to her child and sing to them and do all of the things that our loving home coordinators wrap them up in and bring them. Let's make homemade Play-Doh. It's okay if it makes a mess. We're going to do it together. It's fine. And these moms are just like, wow, I didn't even know. Think of parenting without girlfriends. You can't even fathom it.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, I didn't even know I could do that. They like pictures of themselves. I didn't even know I could print out and make a book for them. They want, they love, or bringing Hot Wheels and teaching them colors and numbers. And it's just like, oh, of course. But how would you know? How would you know?
No, unless someone tells you. And so do you find that these parents, and it sounds like most of them are moms, are they receptive to you coming? I mean, how do you, now I'm going to ask researcher questions, but how do you get in there? How do you find these families?
You get in there through the school, you get in there through word of mouth, because we hire locally, and we're just, we don't have the money to fly people in from UCLA to the middle of nowhere. So we hire locally and we train them like crazy. So often somebody will say, oh, I know Miss Tracy. She was my cheerleading advisor when I was in junior high before I dropped out. Or I know, so there's like, it's not like the nanny, super nanny coming in and telling you what you're doing wrong. It's a neighbor coming in and telling you how to do it right and what a good job you're doing.
That makes so much sense, because that's what research shows, that you're more likely to be receptive to people or people who are like you. That makes, all of us are like that, right? All of us are like that.
And then the women that we're hiring might not have jobs otherwise. And so that's a whole other gift to the community, because then they have all this training, they're empowered, they feel great. And if they aren't moving up the ladder at Save the Children, they go and work in the school or something like that, and they suddenly are just like, oh my gosh, I have a totally different life.
Yeah. So it's helping people on multiple levels.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That
feels pretty good. I mean, I've been there 13 years, and next week I'm going to the border. We run shelters at the border for kids who are out of detention centers and have not yet been sent to their family members while they're waiting to see if they're going to be able to stay legally in the country, but they are in the country legally for the time being. And we catch those families as they leave the detention centers, and it's a humanitarian work here in the United States, which is not something we work globally in that way, but we haven't had to do here. But we take them and check them for strep, for lice, for all the kinds of things one might imagine. The last time I visited one of our shelters, I met a woman who had carried her 13-year-old paraplegic daughter on her back for 19 days and had successfully crossed the border, successfully made it to detention, but they were both sick. So you need someone to be in there to help with a child, or to make sure that there are beds that are, because kids roll off of Red Cross cots. So we have to be there to make sure, here's how we can make this safe. We work with other agencies. Or, for example, to make sure that there's an adult in the bathroom who will keep a kid safe if they go in the middle of the night, or to have play spaces for a child to play safely while a parent deals with insurance or travel or whatever they need to do. These kinds of things, it's just, you see it and you see joy in the middle of a really tragic circumstance, and you just think, okay,
we're helping
these people.
And you know what sounds so important about Save the Children is that it's dealing with both the immediate and acute needs, like you're saying, like coming out of detention center and needing care and support, but also has the long view of what kids need, right? Like the literacy and nutrition and things that may not make an immediate difference. I mean, they do, but they will make a long-term difference for sure, right? And so I think that's really special about the organization.
Yes, definitely. I mean, here in the US, we're really focused on getting kids to kindergarten ready to learn and getting kids reading at grade level by third grade, because you guys know better than I do how important that third grade marker is for whatever. You explain it to me. I don't know.
It is. It's because the brain is so plastic at that time. And so that's when you need to set the foundation. And it's not the case that people are doomed necessarily. That's the beauty of the brain, the human brain, is that we're never fully doomed. We're all learning things all the time, but you have such an advantage if you have all those foundational things early in life. So you know what? I just noticed that we've been talking for 45 minutes, and I know that we were going to promise to open it up for Q&A. So I think maybe we should do that if you're okay with that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Great. Okay. Let's open it up for question and answer. And the way we'll do this, you probably at the bottom of your screen, everyone, and it might be useful. Are we going to go to all of us on can we see all of us, or do we want to just focus on one? Kelly, it's up to you. The way you ask a question is just click on at the bottom of your screen, those little people icon, participants. And if you click on that, you should see something that says raise hand down at the right. If you raise your hand, then I will see you and call on you. So please do that, and I can see everybody. So if you would do that, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to start it out. Adriana, you have done research on sleep in adolescence. And Jen, I know when we mentioned sleep, you said, oh, sleep. So tell us, Adriana and Jen, about your experience with sleep in adolescence and your research there.
Yeah. First of all, sleep in adolescence is so important. We already know that sleep is so important when you are a baby, right? And there's a lot of efforts to make babies sleep better, and that's for parents' benefit and for the kids' benefit. But we know that as teenagers, we need sleep just as much. And it's important for learning, it's important for emotion regulation, it's important for establishing social bonds. And what's amazing about it is that it's not that there's a particular length of time that you should be sleeping, but really the quality of the sleep matters so much. And how we improve quality is what you imagine: no screens before bed, no caffeine before bed, those type of things. So I think the most important thing is that sleep continues to matter during adolescence for healthy brain development. But I'm curious to hear from you, Jen, what your experience is with your kids.
Well, I'm wondering, what do you do about the adolescent brain that wants to switch their clock and stay up super late and sleep super late? What do you do about it?
I think first consistency is really important. So the oscillation between, if you go to bed one night at 8 and then one night at 1 and one night at 4, that's really bad for the brain, because that's like jet lag, right? That's called, actually, there's a term, social jet lag is what it's called when you do that. And that is really inconsistent for the brain to establish a sleep rhythm. So even though it's really hard to set those boundaries, and a lot of parents give up that boundary as kids become teenagers because there's so many other things that kids want autonomy for, that sleep seems like an easy one to give up. It's really important to keep that consistency.
Okay, that's so good. I'm going to use that tonight. I make myself stay up and make my kid go to bed, my eldest, and it is painful because I get up early and my sleep is getting messed up trying to force her.
Around her. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't let her do it.
Okay.
Okay, I see that we have a question from Winnie. If you just want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the dialogue. Interesting on many levels. One of the things, though, that I thought you really touched on that you may not be asked about that much, but I think is really important is this notion of a sort of a workforce of parents who can help other parents. And I see it in other fields or related fields. There's this whole in healthcare, the promotoris is a cadre of people who are Spanish speaking and living in communities that are Spanish speaking to help inform and support Spanish speaking parents access healthcare and a whole range of other services. And it just, clearly from your experience, this is working in rural America. And I just see it working in so many other parts of our world. And yet it's kind of it shouldn't be such an innovative idea. And maybe it kind of flies in the face of UCLA and the professionalism that, we all respect and all support. But on the other hand, this notion that, a lot of really valuable work can be done by people who don't necessarily have, the degrees, but are performing arguably, really important roles. And I just I'm curious, both from the UCLA perspective and also from the Save the Children perspective, should we be trying to really promote this idea of not professionalizing, but, creating a whole mechanism for supporting families and parents?
Well, I'll jump in, but there's nothing like the professionals that UCLA is putting out into the world, and certainly I spoke to your UCLA child psychiatrist today, so it's I couldn't be more of a believer. But in so much of the country, if the option is nothing or a paraprofessional, then you hire locally and you support them and train them like crazy. And there's so much value in that for everyone. I was with a mom, her name was Johnny, and her son's name, her name was Waffles, and her son's name was Johnny. And Johnny was our paraprofessional who had almost no college education at all, but she had been trained and she had her checklist and she had people to talk to every week about the families that she met with. And she kept saying, Johnny is not acquiring vocabulary. I can see it. He's not getting vocabulary. And so she said to Waffles, I think you need to take him in to have his hearing checked. And she went to a Medicaid doctor and it came back, he's fine. And this sweet home coordinator, her name was Tanya Bonecutter, and she just kept saying it.
I think Jen
froze. Adriana, do you want to take it until Jen's back?
Yeah, they're profoundly deaf.
There we go.
But it needed to be caught by someone. Who cares if it's a professional or not? I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm glitching. But anyway, he was able to have the surgeries he needed, and he went to preschool as a hearing kid, behind, but so much better off than he would have been. So I'm all for a paraprofessional going in and helping out however they can.
Adriana, do you want to comment?
No, I think that's exactly right. I completely agree. And I think that especially catching sensory issues early is so important. That changed that person's life, Jen, what you just described.
Okay, thank you. And I think I see Andrew has a question. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Annette. Thank you. Hey, this is fun to listen to. So my question just has to do with like how you're dealing with the pandemic and the COVID and dealing with your kids and going to school or not going to school or Zooming, and then what do you see kind of going forward with where your kids might go, or they're going to stay, they're going to move? That's it, just general. Thank you.
Just me personally, what I'm doing?
Whoever, go for it.
Well, my kids are so lucky. They've had it pretty good. I formed a pod because I had a sixth grader and a third grader, and I knew they needed social interaction more than they needed school. And so I was able to, with a couple of other moms, hire a teacher, and they're so fine, and now they're back in school, and they will be, and masked, and that's all fine. But for the rest of the country, it has looked entirely different, and kids have had really no access. And of course, you have to just be super nimble on any time you're dealing with poverty in different areas of the country. So in some places, we had buses that would go by that had Wi-Fi. And we would have scheduled times where we would go to different little hollers or parks or neighborhoods and just set up so that kids could go download work and upload the next day's work. And, just making sure that that people were seeing kids, getting books to them, coloring books, and making sure to find ways to get them together as safely as possible, just to be with other kids. But my kids, they're golden. I'm not worried about them. Anyone else?
Yeah, same. I feel very lucky. My kids have also been back in school for a few months now, so that's really made a difference for all of us, I think. One thing, Jennifer, that we didn't talk about was your work that I think emerged during the pandemic was the Save with Stories on Instagram. Is that right? So can you say a little bit more about that?
Save with Stories was started because my friend Amy Adams, the actress, she called me the Friday night of everything shutting down and said, what's going to happen to the kids who can't go to school anymore? Mm-hmm. And I said, we're all over it. We're working on it. And she said, what if we had celebrities read books and ask for donations, and we'd be providing really fun book readings to families, and at the same time trying to gather donations. And she said, I have the idea, but I don't know how to do it. And I said, oh, we can do it. So by 8 a.m. the next morning, we were hard at it. Save the Children, my boss at Save the Children is Mark Shriver. His sister's Maria Shriver. He's, Sergeant Shriver and Eunice Kennedy's son. And we just put our heads down and called No Kid Hungry and plowed through, and just, I don't even know, we raised a couple of $1 million. But more important than that, it really became kind of a global thing, all from this little room that I'm sitting in right now, this exact chair, and my awesome other half who sits on the other side of the table, who did all the technical stuff. And we just started emailing friends and saying, would you read a book? And then emailing publishers and saying, could we have rights to your books? And one thing led to another, and it was enormously, thank God, really enormously successful, and jump-started Save in the world of feeding kids, which we had never done before.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think it's really been inspiring how much mobilization there's been around helping kids during the pandemic to get access. Just coming back to the question that we just got about how kids are faring during the pandemic.
Andrew, thank you. Thank you for your question. Andrew is, I have to say, one of the first members of our inaugural board of advisors in psychology. So I appreciate you and your contributions. Other questions? I have a couple million questions. Okay, so having been a mom of two teenage girls, I know that lots of us think about, we get to that time when they're starting to take risks and we become afraid. And, we want to promote independence. Yes. And at the same time, we know that it's amazing that we made it through our teenage years. And we know we're afraid for our daughters and our sons. Adriana, you do research on decision-making in the brain, basically. Mm-hmm. Can you give us some reassurance about kids' risk-taking in adolescence?
Yeah, what I'll say is that it's completely normative. I think that this comes back to wanting that autonomy, and that's why these this idea of yes day is so important, because basically kids want yes day every day, and maybe that's probably not the best approach, but giving them the opportunity to take there are healthy risks is so important, because they're going to take risks no matter what. I mean, we all did it, and we on the other side feel like we came away relatively unscathed, and that's because every adventure is a learning opportunity. And it seems scary from a parent perspective, but it's actually a really normal part of healthy development and healthy brain development.
How much risk are you supposed to let them take?
enough risk that they feel that it's thrilling, but that they're not obviously harming themselves or harming other people. And what may seem risky to them is not that as risky to us, right? Academic risks are actually risks. Trying out for a school play is a risk that we don't see that way because it's not as frightening. But when you're of that age, any social risk really carries a lot of capital, and that is actually a way to kind of build that important part of your brain.
Do we have other questions? Okay,
I have a question.
Good, go ahead.
And Jen, I'm so excited about your work. It's just really fascinating and inspiring. And I wonder, have you, in this work, been able to see ways in which you've changed systems in the schools that you've been involved in, where they're kind of fundamentally rethinking the way they're approaching education? I'm just wondering how we can be involved in really systemic change, and I love the work you're doing, and I can see opportunities for that.
Thank you. Oh, that's so exciting to hear that. There's so little work being done in rural America. I mean, this new stimulus money is really going to lift a lot of kids out of poverty, and I'm grateful for that. No matter, and I would say that no matter how I felt politically, I am a big just advocate, no matter what. So, but it is thrilling. Yes, I have seen schools embrace this work and embrace it in the way that they are really pulling the babies in, because they see the difference. Kindergarten teachers will just talk anecdotally about how they see the difference in kids who have been through our programs on the first day of kindergarten versus kids who have not. And so they'll work really hard to spread our net far and wide in their communities. But then once they're in school and we have this in-school, after-school summer literacy program, they can, the schools that embrace what we bring to them, which is we fill their libraries up with computers and books, and we have people stationed at the school to pull kids who are at highest risk out many times a day from the classroom to work one-on-one or in small group settings in a really kind of fun, lively. I mean, if you think about everything you've heard about the Shriver-Kennedy competitive spirit, that is what they bring, for better, for worse, to these programs, so that kids are just like playing these wild games about math and social, emotional health and literacy. I mean, you just think no one else could have really fathered this whole thing. But the schools that really embrace it, it changes everything, because then parents are brought in, and parents who maybe are illiterate are suddenly invested in learning to read, and they feel welcomed in a new way, and they're brought in and they're fed, and their eyes are checked and their teeth are checked, and they're sent home with books and diapers. Diapers will get parents to do an awful lot. Diapers and food for the next couple of days, and books for their kids, and toothbrushes and clothes. I mean, we will do anything, and the really great connections made are when we're kind of the backbone, but we're pulling in anyone else who wants to help these kids and making sure that we're the convener for all of them so that we just make it easy and palatable and exciting for the parents to reconnect to the idea of school being a safe place. And it changes the entire culture of the school.
Jen, as a former kid from a tiny town in Kansas,
Yeah.
First Jen, I want to thank you personally because your work obviously is making such a difference. You, through your inspiration and your beacon of hope, you're changing lives. And I think we all saw that this evening, and I really want to thank you for that. Adriana, your science, as well as your education of others and just your wisdom, we thank you for that too. It's so important. And I want to thank everybody who joined this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll stay tuned for our next Psychology Connects. And thank you again, Jen and Adriana. This was a fascinating conversation. Thank you for sharing yourselves. And good evening, everybody. Thank you.
So fun. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the Kaufmans for making this happen. Thank you, Adriana. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.